I started yoga back in '98, and I have always been into spiritual philosophy, Indian philosophy, really from my early teens. I started meditating from my early teens, but I found when I started a yoga practice, an asana practice, within 45 minutes, I just felt, what has shifted? Why am I feeling that I don't have any anxiety anymore? Why do I feel so much calmer? What's actually going on biochemically, physiologically, energetically, physically to have caused this? And so I went off to study it, really, not to become a yoga teacher. That was not the desire at all. I was drawn to the Therapeutic yoga philosophy. It happened to be that the second year was about teacher training, and I really just did the first year because I loved the philosophy so much and I wanted to explore it so much. But really, when you go through the exploration of the teachings and you are so changed by it, if you have a fire, that means that you have a passion and a desire to want to share these teachings. It's almost as if you feel as if you found the Holy Grail, and it's like, I just wish other people knew this existed, and you start to have a passion now to look into that. But I certainly know for me, looking back then when anatomy and physiology wasn't particularly important within a yoga teacher training, certainly injury management was never even covered. Yoga, being a very spiritual practice, was always considered to be something that you don't need to learn anatomy and physiology. But I really wanted to understand what's going on in my brain, what's happening in my glands, my organs, my systems, what's happening energetically when I'm practicing, what's happening anatomically when I'm practicing, because you can't just take our physical body and right foot forwards, back foot 45 degrees. That's the really easy bit. Teaching you how to actually deliver a class is really easy. Teaching you to see a whole person as a holistic being and understanding how each factors of who we are directly influence all of those other aspects of who we are. And in a way, yoga can be quite unforgiving in the sense that it can come in, turn everything upside down, ask you to unknow everything that you know, and then ask you to see the world with new eyes. And you really need to be able to be held in that space as you navigate your way through. Ultimately, the asana component of the practice is really very young. It's only about 200 years old, even though images of the asana were certainly seen around 10,000 years ago. Some of the old philosophies looked at 10,000 years ago, but really the practice of asana is really young. And I think that when you think about the intelligence of the yogis, I think how wise they were that they brought something physical to such a body-conscious Western world. Because I think if we came in through the philosophy door, the yoga world right now would look really different. Bring us in through the asana and the physical door, and everyone's interested, everybody wants to do it. So really over the last 20 years, the yoga world has completely changed. 20 years ago, for me to get a cover teacher, I would never be able to find one. Now you guys are going out there in the yoga world with studios opening up everywhere, lots of yoga teachers studying, and lots of different courses being undertaken. And so really for us, what I really wanted to do is to create a training program that allowed you all to teach people in the real world. It's one thing to have a really great experience, but how are you going to be able to support all of your students who walk through the door with different injury and disease states that didn't exist 200 years ago, that our lifestyle factors are so heavily influencing? How are you going to help that person on a physical level, as well as being able to help them on an emotional and an energetic level, so that they have a deeper level of understanding of what's happening? So as a result of that, I lectured at the AYA from 2005 to 2010, and then we launched our own teacher training program at the end of 2010, purely because I had the desire to really want to give and create a training program that meant that teachers could go anywhere in the world to teach. Being from London originally, I would go home and I had done a 1,600-hour teacher training, and it didn't really stand for anything, because back in 2001, yoga training wasn't accredited. And really there wasn't that much training around, and most of the training tended to be in India. But as we progressed, as we've moved through the yoga world, having that accreditation certainly for me was really important. So I wrote the teacher training in 2010, and we launched that at the end. And we had originally were accredited through Yoga Alliance because they acknowledge us as a 200-hour training. And then in 2013, I also brought in Yoga Australia so that your course could be accredited by both bodies, because I felt that was really important. Yoga Australia recognised this training as a 500-hour course because it's 625 hours all up. Yoga Alliance acknowledged this course at 200-hour level because they both don't see eye to eye on contact versus non-contact. But ultimately, by the end of this training, you can apply to be a 500-hour teacher, or you can apply to become a 200. It's totally up to you. So when really looking at this training and what I really wanted to deliver, I really wanted to come from a place where I could bring in everything that I felt that you guys could have. I had a lot of holes in my training. I had a beautiful experience in my training, but I had lots of holes. I didn't have any training in anatomy and physiology, and I was completing my Bachelor of Health Science degree in naturopathy, and I could see that there was so much around holism that could be so important in the yoga world. Holism in the sense of, why is this person coming to class now? Why has this injury happened at this person right now? Why the right shoulder, not the left? What's the energetic component about what this is? Why is a disease the last port of call for someone to wake up? Why is it that people are coming to this practice at a time in their life where they're needing to really explore a deeper, more meaningful way of living and being? And why hasn't this been before? Why now? So really fundamentally for us, what I really wanted to do was to have a strong anatomy and physiology base. I really wanted our graduates to be able to understand how the body works systemically. Yes, all of the organs function individually, but they also work together. So I wanted to understand why, when a teacher would say that standing forward bends are really therapeutic for insomnia or relax the nervous system, I wanted to know why that was. It wasn't enough for me to just be told that's what happens. Teach me about what's going on in my nervous system. How is that communicating with my brain and my endocrine glands so that I can then feel empowered to take over what's happening in my own body with my own injuries? How can I manage inflammation, for example, in my own body, and how can the practices support that, and in what way? So I really wanted to bring a strong anatomy and physiology base. So we have 65 hours of A&P. We're required to only have 20, but I didn't feel 20 was enough. So we break down all of the systems, and then we look at how they work systemically, but also how they're influenced by pranayama practices, how they're influenced by asana practices. But also now science is backing up what the yogis knew a long time ago, and they're also looking into what's even happening on a tissue level to emotions like gratitude and forgiveness and happiness and a positive mindset or a negative mindset. They're actually now dissecting what's happening on a cellular level when our mindset is influencing our body in that way. So you can't ever just have a physical body without the layers of everything else. And they are so hugely influencing that when you see a student going through shifts, they physically start to change. They physically don't look the same. You can start to see that something is shifting. And as a yoga teacher, that's what you're there to support and to create as an experience for that student. How they run with that is up to them, and that's their own personal journey. So also looking at the way that we can work with yoga therapeutically. So when you've got 35, 40 students coming into the room, how are you going to remember their injuries? How are you going to be able to know what's therapeutic, what's contraindicated? How are you going to language with that person that that's the case when you're in everybody else? Because many years ago, in my early days of teaching, a student came along who had a broken toe. So the whole class was taught a broken toe class rather than modifying for that person, because we just didn't have the anatomy and physiology knowledge to back that up at that time. But what we also need to go through are the layers within that person, and that includes having a really good understanding of the philosophical precepts that have really made up these teachings. They knew what they were doing when they were talking about dedication, persistence, consistency over a long period of time. We base a lot of our vinyasa practices around Patanjali and his Yoga Sutras, of which there are 196. Only 3 of those 196 talk about asana. All of the rest talk about the mind and the dedication to the practice and meditation practices. So interestingly enough, they didn't take you too much focus on that. So once your students get consistent, you'll start to see shifts, and you'll start to see that there's a deeper level of understanding that goes on beyond that. And also what's important about that is not just about what your students do in terms of coming in and doing a practice, it's also about their dinacharya, their lifestyle. How are they living? How are they thinking? How are they operating? What's their work life like? What's their home life? Because all of that starts to shift. All of that starts to change. And often as yoga teachers, we're the first ones to know some really very private aspects of a student's journey that they really haven't shared with anyone else. And so that goes in the vault to be held, doesn't get shared. You're there as a support to that person as they go on their own journey. So you're there really in service. The other aspect about our training that really makes us quite different and stand out is the level of practical teaching experience that you have. We just really feel that it's crucial that you get hands-on teaching experience before you graduate, and that you do that while you're being mentored. Otherwise, what is the point? So you start off teaching each other first, and then you get rostered to teach public classes, the beginners class at 6 p.m. on a Tuesday, mentored by Karen, and then our 7:30 Power Flow mentored by Rachel. So it means that by the time you've finished, you already have been mentored to be able to teach the public. We had a couple of teachers who went for a teaching job a few weeks ago, and they were in a room of about 15 people. They're the only two who had practical teaching experience before they actually graduated. None of the others had had any. And I've mentored lots of teachers over the years who haven't studied here but have finished their training and they don't feel ready and they don't feel confident, but they actually have got a lot to share and a lot to give, but they just don't feel confident to do it because they've never had that practical teaching experience. Within that practical lab, you also have the opportunity of being able to teach each other. So we have 9 asana labs, so they actually break down all of the asana component, like Surya Namaskar, forward bends, back bends, lateral flexion, standing asana, standing balancing, inversions, etc. So you go right the way through the full set of asana and then break them down. What modifications do you need for this student? What variations of this asana do they exist? What props do you need to provide so that student is supported while they're in it or moving deeper? How do you support somebody in a beginner level? How do you support somebody at a power flow level, etc.? So having that practical hands-on teaching experience is really crucial. It's really what lends you your voice, because you don't want to go out there like anyone else other than who you are. So really these practical labs is an opportunity for you to really find your voice as a teacher, find who you want to be, find your passion for the practice, what is unique for you, and how can you share that. And really with the yoga teacher training, first and foremost, it's really a huge opportunity for you guys to move through your own personal journey of transformation as you go through that process. If you're creating and providing the space and practices for other people to have a transformative experience, you have to have that first. You have to know what that feels like to go through a crucible of fire and hold space for yourself whilst you do that. How are you going to apply these teachings? Otherwise, they're just oil and water. If you can't live them, digest them, that they don't become your truth, how can you share those with anybody else?